Welcome to Practical Changemakers, a carbon positive story. I'd like to acknowledge that we're speaking to you today on Wajak Noongar Boodja and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Louise Tarrier and I'm the CEO of Carbon Positive Australia. Our mission is to empower and encourage everyone in Australia to take action that revitalises and improves the health of landscapes and communities. We do this via our carefully selected Australian tree planting projects and by providing inspiring education programs. Through our work, we get to talk to and spend time with people who are working for the health of our environment every day. These practical change makers and leaders don't often make the headlines, but the work that they do is vital in our changing world. It's my pleasure to introduce some of them to you and for you to hear more about their work, to be inspired and to find out ways you can also become a practical change maker. My guest today is Laure Legros. Laure is a French-Australian citizen currently living in Sydney. She is head of experience at non-profit WorkforClimate, which provides climate-concerned professionals with tools, guidance and community to help them accelerate their company's action on climate. She is also the Australian co-lead for Climate Fresque, a non-profit on a mission to educate people about climate science fundamentals through a very serious game. Laure's career in climate change was started 2 years ago when she decided to leave her job in digital advertising because she felt like the urgency and magnitude of the climate change was too big to work on anything else. Becoming a parent to a now 3-year-old little boy also accelerated her journey to this work. Laure has a deep love for the outdoors and loves connecting with nature through sports, both on land and in the ocean. She particularly enjoys long-distance challenges and recently completed a self-organised Ironman race, as the race she was registered for unfortunately got cancelled due to COVID. Laure, I think like many of us, you had an awakening to the climate crisis. So I'd love you to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you and what woke you up to climate.
Sure. Thank you very much, Louise, for this really nice introduction. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm dialing in today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. So you're right to say that I had a climate awakening. I think, probably 3 years ago when I started this journey, I didn't know very much about climate change and I didn't see climate change as a kind of central issue that would affect me personally. My brain, I think, was putting that in it's a problem for others to fix kind of category. And I had no particular connection to climate change. And so that changed drastically when I participated to this workshop called Climate Fresque. And what happened was in a very short amount of time, 3 hours, I went from knowing not much about climate change to suddenly realizing that it was a much bigger problem than I had anticipated. And there was a disconnection between how much I thought I knew about environmental problems in general and what I was finding out that I knew about climate change, which was really very little. And so that led me to start a process to educate myself about climate. So I spent a few months really diving into the issue, reading books, consuming podcasts, watching documentaries, and pretty much trying to absorb as much as possible about the problem. And when I finished that process, I realized that I really couldn't go on and continue my sort of business as usual career. And I really had to do something significant about it that was going to be above the, normal actions that you would take on a day-to-day basis. It had to be bigger than that. And so that's why I decided to transition my career and join the climate movement.
And that's amazing. And I just wanted to sort of touch on something, because I think for a lot of individuals, when they start that journey, it can very easily lead to, oh my gosh, what can I do? And you obviously found your way through that out the other side. So I'd really appreciate you kind of just explaining what what took you through that process in that way so that you could find your way out and didn't get kind of mired down and, feeling depressed, or what can I do?
Yeah. I think that's a really important question. And, I do acknowledge that these issues, climate change, but also other environmental challenges, are very overwhelming. And it's really easy to feel powerless in the face of what might happen. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that and find ways to go past it. And for me, that's always been being in action and knowing that I was doing something about it. I think one particular way that I was able to kind of understand my role in that movement was by developing that overall understanding of the problem, but also the kind of numbers associated with them, because we know, climate change is a big numbers problem, and it's really hard to differentiate between the little actions that we need to do on a day-to-day basis, like recycling or composting, and the really big things that also need to happen in order to shift the system and build the kind of desirable future that we're all thriving for. And so for me, that implied being in a constant process of challenging myself and reading and exchanging with other people, and potentially challenging my own conception about the solutions, because what I found is it's always more complicated than it looks, and there's always more to that problem. So it's a constant kind of questioning and challenging myself and talking to other people about what they're doing to address the problem.
And I love that you kept that curiosity, and you kept that curiosity open throughout that process, because I think, in order to move through it, you do have to open yourself up to question, don't you? You have to open yourself up to the understanding that by learning more, you can affect more.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a little bit more about the Climate Fresk game, because I know that was a key component in some of the awakening around climate change, and part of the reason that you kind of went through that journey as well, and understood more, about the various issues, that climate change is provoking for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really care about this organization because I could see firsthand the power that it had on me in terms of putting me on the track to be that climate advocate. And so I'm a big believer that I can sort of play a role in doing that same thing for other people. So Climate Fresk is a nonprofit organization that started in France about 3 years ago with the goal to make climate science more accessible and approachable for everyone. So it's a collaborative and interactive serious game on climate change. It's actually a card game. So you play in teams, you have 42 cards, and the goal is to place those cards in the right order of cause to consequence. So what you end up with is this really visual representation of the climate system that kind of takes you through the fundamentals of the problem, what's happening, why is this happening, what's the physics and kind of scientific facts behind it, but also what are the consequences and the impacts. And so that's the first phase of the workshop, where we work through that science component, and we build what we call the fresk, so that visual representation of climate change. And then in the second and third part of the workshops, we get to actually go through our emotions, talk about what this whole thing makes us feel, and then discuss what is it that we can do about it. So talking about solutions and actions at different level, whether it's from the perspective of an individual or from the perspective of a company when we organize the workshop in the context of a company.
And I love that it's got all those different learning styles mixed in, because quite often people need information in different ways, don't they? So you might be a visual person, or you might be somebody who learns by doing, or who learns by reading the science. And it seems that game kind of incorporates all of those elements. And the fact that you're all together in a team as well gives you that support.
Yeah, 100%. The team component is really, really important. So as facilitators, when we run this workshop, one of the most important things that we try to do is not answer people's questions. Some of the time we actually can't answer the questions because we're not experts ourselves. Like, I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not an expert in any kind of way. But I do help people get to the answer by looking at the cards and working out together to get to the solution. So that's a really, really important part of the whole idea behind climate risk.
And I love as well, you and I met because we've got a shared feeling that, everybody who, regardless of who you are, has got a part to play in the climate solution, and that we as individuals can be totally empowered to actually take actions. And in your day role, I suppose we could call it, in WorkforClimate, you do exactly that, don't you? You empower individuals to actually be able to feel that they're part of the solution. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that and how WorkforClimate works, essentially?
Yeah, sure.
Everything we do has an impact, from how we commute to work to what we buy at the grocery store. Our lifestyle choices are contributing to our carbon footprint. Did you know Australians have one of the highest personal carbon footprints in the world? The good news is we can change that. Measuring your footprint is easy with our carbon footprint calculator. Custom designed for Australians, it gives you an accurate footprint calculation so you can really know your number. You'll also learn practical everyday ways to reduce and offset the impact of your lifestyle to help combat climate change. You can calculate your footprint at carbonpositiveaustralia.org.au/calculate. For over 21 years, Carbon Positive Australia has planted trees and sequestered carbon. Our tree planting increases canopy cover and biodiversity, and also creates positive climate health and well-being outcomes. We take a nature-led approach and are passionate about providing ecologically sensitive planting that protects our environment. We only plant biodiverse native species and specialise in working with landholders to create innovative solutions for carbon planting. We are renowned for our research and monitoring of ecological outcomes. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you can plant trees with us by donating at carbonpositiveaustralia.org.au/donate.
Yeah, sure. So the idea behind WorkforClimate is that employees have tremendous power in influencing their organizations. So the whole theory of change behind that is we know that corporations are absolutely critical in addressing the climate crisis. And we know that these organizations respond to different stakeholders. So whether it's investors, competitors, consumers, the stakeholders that we address with WorkforClimate is the employees themselves. So we see employees as the driving force of any organization, and we want to mobilize them to urge their companies to do more on climate, both with their own business practices, but also in terms of policy advocacy. The way that we do this is via content, community and cohorts. So we use content to nurture people along the journey from interested to engaged to taking action. And we use community and cohorts as forums to gather feedback to know whether people are making progress and driving impact. So we have different programs that we offer for employees, from our kind of flagship program that will take you through the fundamentals of corporate climate actions, to our kind of specialized courses, as well as resources that we make available for free for everyone, that will take you through some specific areas that you might want to take on in your own organization. So for example, if you decide that your goal is to switch your company to 100% renewable energy, then we have a playbook for that. that. And that playbook will describe the step-by-step method to advocate for that goal within your organization.
And we also know here at Carbon Positive Australia that works, because we did a survey called Carbon Care back in September 2020. And we asked organizations, what was the main driver of change? And it was always employees. So we know that actually, as an employee, you've got this huge ability to advocate for change in your organization. Can you give us an example, Laure, of sort of a specific challenge that an employee might take on with their employer? Just sort of talk us through some steps of that.
Yeah, sure. So the way that we kind of think about, the way that we're thinking about corporate climate action in the context of WorkforClimate is via 4 different impact areas. So I talked briefly about energy and switching your organization to 100% renewable energy. There's also emissions, money, and influence. So emissions is about trying to get your company to commit to a credible net zero goal. And at least reducing their emissions in line with science. The investment money pillar is more about making investments that are compatible with a sustainable future. And that can be something as kind of simple, in theory at least, switching your superannuation fund to, if it's a company that makes investments, then switching their portfolios to more ethical investments. And then the last one is about policy and advocacy. So helping employees advocate for their companies to take a stand and advocate for pro-climate solution, as well as taking a stand against those solutions that will not be compatible with a safe climate.
And I think as well, for employees as well, that can give them a sense of not only taking a bigger role in their organisation, not just as an employee, but as actually an interested stakeholder. But it can also allow them to just take that wider view of their part in a solution. And so do they get through WorkforClimate, do they get any support in that process, or is it just educational support that you're giving at the moment?
No, we're actually very much action triggered. So we will provide you with that support. We're not just going to send you a bunch of resources and let you go on your way and be like, good luck. We provide programs. One of our programs is called the WorkforClimate Academy, and it's a cohort-based course, which means that it's a bunch of people learning together and working towards an specific outcome. So the WorkforClimate Academy caters to pretty much everyone who is willing to make a significant change in their organization, and we will help you every step of the way. So first, we'll take you through the different paths and goals available for you, and try to help you work out what makes sense for you and your organization. And that will actually help you build your roadmap to drive action. So we will do that with our own coaches, but also through peer learning. So creating that community of people who are working on similar goals and helping each other out by sharing best practice, sharing case studies, and also work through specific problems that they will encounter on a day-to-day.
So I'm an employee, and I've decided that I'd really like my organisation to make some changes, because I think that actually, well, not only could they possibly save some money, but they would definitely be doing a much better thing for the environment. Me and my colleagues, we've all got children and grandchildren, and we're thinking about the future. So how would I start? What would be the first step that I would take if I wanted to make a change? So, well, I would personally think that the first step would be to join our WorkforClimate community, but I'm a little bit biased, obviously. Of course. Yeah.
I think the first thing that we encourage people to do is to find others around them to help them do this work, because it's work that is quite difficult, and we know it's going to take time and a lot of effort, and we don't want you to be doing this by yourself. So the first thing that we encourage people to do is to try and find colleagues that are interested in joining them in whatever capacity. So can be someone looking for people interested in joining a working group and forming an actual climate champions group or sustainability group, but it can also be people that may not have the capacity to be involved right now, but will be supporting you by signing a petition if you ask them to, or responding to a survey, things like that. So the first step is to kind of try and build that collective power, so that when you go and make your ask to your leadership team, you also have a lot of backing from other colleagues to make your ask a little bit more compelling. So that's the first step. The second step, I would say, would be to try and do that kind of homework of understanding what is it that your company is already doing, because most companies are already doing some kind of action on sustainability, if only for social license reasons. And I think, most companies are generally interested in doing the right things. It's just that there's a lot of challenges coming at them, whether it's, shortage of skills, or not knowing where to start, or maybe some cost challenges as well. So do that work of trying to understand what your company is doing and what role it might be able to play in addressing some of those challenges, and understanding, what is at play as well for the organization, because that will help you kind of form your argumentation and make a compelling case. Because if you go and see your organization and explain in very clear terms what is it that is at play for the company in terms of opportunities and risk when it comes to climate change, then that will help you make your case. So that can be, to be a little bit more pragmatic on this, it can be having a look at your company's track record on sustainability. Do they have existing commitments? Are they implementing some initiatives already when it comes to sustainability? And that can be anything from the very, very basic of, okay, we have a recycling program, to things that are more ambitious and actually address the systemic aspect of the problem. So spending time understanding what your company is doing. And we also provide you with frameworks and guides on how to do that. So we have a guide that helps you, answer those questions and give you tips on places to go and people to ask you to get that information. And then we also help you interpret that information, because, if you're working for a large company, chances are they are already committed. And so they will have some sort of engagements along the lines of, we take climate change seriously and we are committing to be net zero or carbon neutral or whatever other terms. And if you're not really sharp on how to interpret those commitments, you might think that, okay, maybe they're already doing everything that they need to do. But, from the perspective of someone who has been reading at those commitments, I can tell you that there is a lot more that every company can do that goes beyond those kind of commitments on paper.
So that's fantastic to know. And I think for all individuals, when they feel that they can make a contribution in that way, it can really be empowering and kind of stop that spiral that we talked about earlier, where you become, this problem's just too big for me. So just to sort of finish our chat today, I'd love to find out a little bit more about your connection to nature and how you've, and the Ironman in particular, because I think that's quite a fantastic endeavour. So we'd just love to find out a little bit more about that, and how you connect through that way. Yeah,
sure. So I'm a big sports fan. I've practiced many sports throughout my entire life, and triathlon is the kind of later sports that I wanted to try. I have a thing for endurance and long distance events, so I was kind of drawn naturally to that Ironman distance because it felt like a really big challenge to take on. So I had this opportunity to train for my first full Ironman distance. And I was training for 8 months, and then suddenly the race is canceled. I was ready. And then you hear, oh, it's not happening anymore. But if you want, you can defer your entry to the next Ironman, which is happening in Cairns. But there was a slight problem for me in terms of going to Cairns for that event is I have a personal commitment to avoid flying unless it's absolutely necessary. And I don't put a single sporting event in the absolutely necessary category. And so I had to kind of figure out alternative ways to complete my challenge. And so that's how I decided to have my own Ironman race, because, you know, the cool thing about that is if you're the only participant, well, you're going to be the winner. So I won my race. I did my race.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. And I think it just shows the commitment and the kind of person that you are, Laure, that you're committed to the action path that you've set yourself on, and are walking the talk really in terms of encouraging others and empowering yourself to do the absolute best that you can do. So if we've got anyone else who's totally inspired by you and what you've been doing, how can they begin their journey? Where can they find Climate Fresk, and where can they find out more as an employee about taking action?
Yeah, sure. So Climate Fresk is available on our website, and you can find out about upcoming workshops. We list them directly on the website. You can find out more about WorkforClimate at workforclimate.org. And there's actually a program that you can sign into right now, the Work4Climate Academy that I mentioned. So would be really interested to talking to anyone who might be interested in joining. And I'm also quite active on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best place to find me if you want to chat about anything climate related.
Thank you, Laure. I mean, you certainly inspired me. I had so much more to talk to you about today, but obviously we're on a fairly time limit of what we can talk about. But yes, thank you so much, and thank you for being an inspirational change maker.
Thank you, Louise. That was a pleasure.